Hi, I'm Layla, and I am a healthy woman inside and out.
My name is Amy Olivero Pirtle, and I am a healthy woman inside and out.
I'm Dr. Linda Wilson, and I am a healthy woman inside and out.
Thank you for joining us on the Healthy Woman Inside and Out. This show is for women, about women. I will tell you, it doesn't matter what you're going through. You're going to hear some amazing stories from women who have been through something, but yet they managed to get through it. I know that might be you. You might be going through something or have been through something and you just want to get through it. Well, the Healthy Woman Inside and Out want to help you on that journey. Or you might say, that's me, I've been there, I've experienced that. So I just want to tell you right now, if you're watching this show, you are a healthy woman inside and out. Welcome to the Healthy Woman Inside and Out. Today we're going to be talking about raising awareness. Now, before I bring my guests on, I'm going to tell you, it's really easy to sometimes gain weight, but talk about losing weight, that's a whole nother thing in itself. But our guest today is going to share with us about how she lost weight, but the reason why she lost weight, and then she's going to help you to raise awareness of what you can do as well. So, without further ado, I want to welcome Amy. Amy, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
So, Amy, I know you struggle with weight and you know, certain things happen, but you were older when you started struggling with weight. Isn't that not true? No, I think you were a teenager because you mentioned something about your teenage years as well.
Right.
Can you share with our listening audience the things that you went through and why you went through it?
Sure, I can share. At this point, I'm not struggling with weight. I'm in a good place in my life, but starting from a very early age, probably my teenage years, and even before that, struggled with a negative body concept. I started kind of finagling with the way that I ate and got into what now I know was called disordered eating. For many, many, many years, I probably was dabbling in the world of eating disorders without really getting fully lost in it. However, in the last couple of years, due to a lot of other stresses in my life and other things that happened, it became a full-fledged eating disorder called anorexia. Anorexia is characterized by very low body weight through self-starvation, and it is usually, as all eating disorders are, accompanied by other emotional issues. So for me, treatment didn't come until I was 50 years old, which is really fairly rare in the world of eating disorders, because eating disorders are typically considered a disorder that teenagers and young adults are dealing with, because it's focused on body image and other factors that may be genetic or environmental, but you know, dealing with it in later years is a little bit different of an experience.
Now, did you experience it in your teenage years, or no, you were fine as a teenager?
You know, I don't really know the exact time that it began. Probably as I was going off to college is when I started, when no one was kind of fixing my meals for me at home and no one was watching what I did. I can remember times where I would go days without eating because I was feeling like was feeling fat or didn't like how I looked, or you know, the typical freshman 15 pounds that everybody talks about that you gain, and I didn't want to gain that. And so it became, for me, I think, kind of a game of playing around with what could I eat, not eat, how could I control my weight, and it definitely became a control kind of thing for me. But after college, you know, I have 3 healthy children. I took very good care of myself throughout the pregnancies. After the pregnancies, I probably went into the disordered eating mode again to lose the weight. But eating disorders really are not entirely about eating. They're about a lot of other things that we can talk about.
What are some of those other things that they're about? If it's not about eating, not about I don't want to gain weight, so I'm going to be
Right.
in control of not gaining weight.
Well, that's part of it.
Okay.
There are actually genetic issues that can play a role in eating disorders as well as environmental. So if we look at the media and what the perfect looking person is supposed to be like, females especially, they're voluptuous and they're thin. And if you look at models and the kinds of images that we are faced with from the time we're very young through the media, that plays a role into how we start looking at ourselves. Also, it could be a number of other issues: depression, anxiety. People, a lot of times, who have eating disorders were abused early on in their lives. So there's other emotional problems that can then lead into these eating disorders. I probably do have a genetic predisposition for it, which is not meaning that's the end-all be-all, okay, I'm going to have an eating disorder. But then the emotional factors that came into play just sort of pushed me over the edge. So there are other factors involved, and everybody's story is a little bit different. I also want to point out that eating disorders aren't just about losing weight and being, wanting to be super skinny or look a certain way. That there are a number of eating disorders, not just anorexia, which is what I was struggling with. There is bulimia, which a person can look perfectly normal weight for them, but still be purging whatever they put into their body in order to get rid of it. There's exercise addiction, where people are trying to counteract the calories they put in. Now there's what's joined the family of eating disorders is binge eating disorder. And that's where obviously people go on binges eating large amounts of food. And that may be followed by purging, it may not be. So there's a whole family of eating disorders, and we're becoming more and more aware of them. And finding better ways of treating them.
What would you say are some of the causes for people to say, hey, I don't want food anymore, I don't want to put that in my system, besides I don't want to gain weight? Because you mentioned that, and you said there were other things also that would cause them to want to not gain weight, other issues. And so what are some of those other issues?
Well, an eating disorder really is, for a lot of us, just the issue of control. We feel like everything else in our lives is completely gone out of control in one way or another, but we can control what we're putting into our bodies. Some people might be punishing their bodies with either restricting or overeating. Some people it's a control issue. Some people are so terrified of putting things in their body that don't have some sort of nutritional value that it becomes an eating disorder. So there's different factors. There are actually recently the International Association, IAE, of Eating Disorders Professionals met. So it's an international organization, and it drew in lots of organizations from all the world into a conference last month in Boston.
Oh, really?
And there's a group of 9 or 10 of those organizations that got together because they were really concerned about eating disorders and misinformation that's out there, because people don't understand eating disorders. There's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of myths about it. And they put forth a paper which states the 9 truths of eating disorders. So if I could just read through those, that's going to clear up some things for us, and then we can touch on some of these in more detail. So these truths are all born of myths that people have about eating disorders. So number 1, you can't tell by looking at someone whether they have an eating disorder. People with eating disorders come in all shapes and sizes, and you can't just tell. Truth number 2, families are not to blame. In the old days, back when I was in school, if you had an eating disorder, which is probably one reason I would deny that I had any issues with my eating, it was usually thought that the reason was because you had a bad family. Your parents expected too much of you. There was, something wrong with the family system. Not necessarily the truth. Truth number 3, families actually can be a patient's best allies in treatment. And I can definitely speak to that, in that the support that I've had through my family is one of the reasons why I've been able to experience recovery. Truth number 4, eating disorders are not choices. So when people say, why don't you just eat? It's not as simple as that. They're actually serious, biologically influenced mental illnesses. So
Would
it
you
is
say
in the
that's
world
why
of
some
mental
people, when
illness.
they purge, and people are saying, "Why don't you just eat?" and they're like, "I'm eating," but then they purge.
But they're
it.
purging, yeah. And the purging is a type of addiction that they're getting that out and they can't stop because they want to get rid of, whatever they've put into their body because they're afraid it will make them gain weight. It's another control issue.
Okay.
Emotional, but it's definitely a type of mental illness. Truth number 5, eating disorders affect people of all genders, ages, races, ethnicities, sexual orientations, and socioeconomic statuses.
Wow.
It's commonly thought of as a female, white, middle and upper class disease. It is not. Those are the people that are most visible, and those are the people that treatment is most accessible to because treatment is so expensive. And insurance will sometimes cover parts of it, sometimes not. And so there's a lot of people out there suffering from eating disorders who are not getting the help they need because of some of the barriers to treatment. Truth number 6, eating disorders carry an increased risk for both suicide and physical and mental complications. So when you do have disordered eating or an eating disorder, you are affecting every organ in your body. A malnourishment, whether it's through binging, purging, or through not eating, through restricting, your body becomes malnourished, and that affects every organ of your body.
Before you go on, I'd like to ask you a question because this thought just came to mind for me. Do men have these eating disorders too, or is it just found in females?
That's a great question, and that's another one of our invisible populations that we're having trouble reaching out to and meeting the needs of, because yes, men and boys are suffering from eating disorders. I can't remember what the statistic, if it was up to 10% of the population of people with eating disorders are men. It's probably higher, but it's so unreported. I mean, there's other factors that play into a boy or a man admitting that they have an eating disorder, in the world of female eating disorders. It's very difficult.
You won't hear about it.
Right. Plus, many of the programs are female-only programs. So they are not necessarily offering services to men.
So it kind of shuts them out.
So it's a little bit, yeah. Okay. The next truth, number 7, genes play a role in eating disorders, as I mentioned earlier, but environment also influences the development, which is a lot of it is the media and if a social environment of high schools and middle schools and bullying and what kids experience as they're going through school. Truth number 8, genes are not destiny though. Just because there might be a genetic disposition, it is not destiny when it comes to an eating disorder. So probably I had a genetic predisposition. I actually have one of my children who also has struggled with an eating disorder, who's doing great now, thank you. But the other two have been fine, and so it's not.
So it just was one of your children?
Just happened to be one of my kids,
okay.
Yeah. Finally, truth number 9, full recovery from an eating disorder is possible. It takes a lot of work. It takes intervention. It takes addressing the emotional issues that are surrounding the eating disorder. It takes a lot of support from family and friends and therapists and nutritionists, and you can have a whole team of people working with you. But you can fully recover. So. But
isn't it sometimes the family that says, "Why don't you just eat?"
Right. Sometimes the family is a barrier to recovery.
Okay.
So that all has to be in the whole process of treatment. Those are the kinds of things that have to be determined. What is going to be the best? How does treatment look best for each person? That's why a one-size-fits-all kind of treatment does not work for eating disorders. It needs to be individually kind of looked at and planned out for that person because everybody has a different background, different circumstances, different needs. The needs of women in my age group getting treatment are far different than the needs of a teenager. I have family, there's careers, there's other things that have to be taken into consideration. The fact that it's been so long-term sometimes makes it even more insidious. And whereas the teenagers, hopefully we can get them early on in their process and change the way that they're thinking about their bodies and the way that they're thinking about food and get things turned around for them.
What are some of the signs? Are there signs to know that that someone's having an eating disorder? I mean, besides you notice that they're not the weight they used to be and they're getting smaller and smaller. But what
Right.
are some early signs to detect that someone might have an eating
Right.
disorder?
It's really hard to tell, particularly because people with eating disorders we're very skilled at hiding things and trying not to let people know what's going on. So some of the signs that maybe parents might look for in their kids are they're not eating like they used to. They're sometimes, and this seems odd, but they're spending inordinate amounts of time preparing food in the kitchen and cooking, but not necessarily eating it. Or they make up we as a group will make up excuses that, oh, I've already eaten, or I'll eat later, or I've had enough, and in order to avoid eating. Sometimes people will just begin to isolate and avoid social situations, particularly those that avoid food, which if you think about it, a lot of social situations where people get together, there's food involved.
Right.
So people might avoid that. Weight loss, obviously, but that's, it could also be weight gain. It could be a binge eating disorder where a person is gaining weight, and that's even harder to tell.
Because they're gaining the weight.
They're gaining weight. So in the mind of people who just have this idea of an eating disorder as someone who is, skeletal looking, that's not how.
Necessarily the
That's
case.
not. That's just a small percentage of eating disorders.
I can kind of relate to it a little bit, and I say a little bit because I know I was going through something in my life, and I would literally eat, just finish the meal, but even though I finished the meal, I still felt like I need to have something in my mouth. I need to constantly keep eating. So that's why I say I can relate to it a little bit. But I was gaining weight, and it really didn't bother me because I felt like I could put on something to hide that by wearing big dresses, wearing big shirts, over my pants. So you really couldn't tell that I was gaining that weight, but I knew I was gaining that weight.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there is a fine line between emotional eating and eating disorders, and how that you cross that line you have to be really careful not to cross that line.
Okay.
Because a lot of people are emotional eaters, and I think that falls into the whole idea of disordered eating, but there's other criteria that need to be met in order for it to be considered an actual eating disorder,
really crossed
requiring
the line.
treatment. So yeah, hopefully you never cross the line.
Well, thank you for telling me I hadn't crossed the line.
As far as I know, I'm not a medical clinician or anything like that, so I cannot make that diagnosis.
I know you're not, but
yeah.
having experienced it and gone through it, you can share with us, what you've gone through, what you have researched on. Can you tell our listening audience, where can they go? Some of the places, I know you gave us one place, but are there other areas, other places they can go if they really say, hey, that's me and I need help? What can they do?
Well, they can start with their medical doctor. They may need to do a little research ahead of time, so sometimes medical doctors aren't tuned in to eating disorders, particularly if you're older, as much as they might be to pediatricians might be to teenagers. But medical doctor, you can go online, and there are on various websites, if you just would Google eating disorder assessment, you can actually do self-assessments online,
really?
which are not, I don't necessarily want anybody to think those are the end-all be-all medical diagnoses. But if you're concerned about some of your behaviors, those are ways to kind of do a screening. Probably the biggest organization in our country is National Eating Disorders Association, which is NEDA.org.
Okay.
You can go to their website and get lots of information. So to me, gathering information, seeking medical help, if it doesn't, talking to somebody is the biggest thing you need to do. If it doesn't work to talk to your parents or your friends, find somebody else to talk to, find a medical person, reach out for help. I think that's the hardest thing. I know it was for me because I always saw it as a sign of weakness that, okay, I got this, I can deal with this. And it's actually a sign of strength to really be able to reach out and ask for help. So the other thing is I'm trying to make myself available to people who might be struggling and can then lead them to resources. part of my whole recovery process is I feel like it's been a journey, and my journey has brought me to this point right now where I feel like I have this vision, and it's my mission to work with other people who are struggling with eating disorders, and I'm just all at the beginning of doing all this.
Oh, great.
But I'm really anxious to kind of delve in there and help people. I feel like with eating disorders, one of the big problems is the relapse rate is pretty high.
So do you do coaching or one-on-one?
I hope to.
Okay.
I'm working on building a career. I've been out of work for a couple of years because I've been sick, and I've been getting better. And I had to work on recovery first and get to a place where I feel really healthy. My dream actually is to work with individuals who maybe have already gone through treatment and work with them in follow-up types of care situations to try to prevent the relapse.
Okay.
Speaking for myself, I know I've had lapses since I was in treatment. That's where maybe you have a few bad days, but then you get back on track. So we call those lapses, and those are to be expected in the whole journey to recovery. Relapse is where you completely fall back into the old patterns, the old behaviors, and you really need treatments again. So if we could somehow work with people after they've had the intensive treatment, been in the intensive treatment programs, and do some follow-up and work with them in a follow-up kind of situation, maybe we can decrease those relapse rates. I also have this dream of really trying to identify and work with the populations, as we were talking about, who are almost invisible when it comes to eating disorders. And I would particularly mention people of color, people who are transgender. There's a lot of body issues, and the transgender population has a very high rate of eating disorders in proportion to what the typical population has.
Oh, wow.
Women in middle and later years, again, not a typical population for eating disorders. Men and boys, and people in lower socioeconomic statuses. There's others too, I'm sure, but those are just a few of the populations that I would somehow like to, at some point, work toward finding those people, helping them seek out resources and treatment, so that they're also being treated for their eating disorders.
Well, if you're watching this show and you've heard what Amy has said, I would encourage you to contact Amy, because she's looking to work with you. And I know it's kind of hard that you're saying, no, but I don't know who she is. That's okay. You don't have to know her. All you have to know is that she wants to help you. She wants to make sure that you don't fall back into those old patterns. She wants to help you stay in that recovery process. So Amy, how can they contact you?
The best way to contact me probably is through email.
Okay.
And my email address is Amy, A-M-Y, Eliz, E-L-I-Z, 21 @yahoo.com.
So would you repeat that again for
Sure.
them?
It's my first name, Amy, A-M-Y, first four letters of Elizabeth, E-L-I-Z, 21 @yahoo.com.
I always glean something from you whenever I'm talking to you, and it's so nice to have you on the show. And I look forward to hearing about your coaching, more about your coaching and the people that you're going to be helping. That's so exciting, because it really is. The more people you can help, the more healthier you become, and they become as well.
I hope so. It's a passion. It's become a passion of mine to help and reach out to others. So that's what I'm hoping will happen.
Well, thank you, Amy, for being on the
Thank you
show.
for having me.
I want to tell you about The Healthy Woman Inside and Out. It was a book written for women, about women. And even though it's for women, about women, I will tell you that men should read it too. The Healthy Woman Inside and Out was written during the time that I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. That's right. When the doctor said that I had multiple sclerosis, I asked her two questions. First, can I live with it? Secondly, what do I need to do? I'm just one of those individuals who say, I got places to go, people to see, and things to do. So I would encourage you to pick up a copy of this book. You can go to our website, which is www.aquariuscreation, CREATION, publishing.com. Again, that's www.aquariuscreation, Creation, CREATION, publishing.com. Pick up your copy today.